down in a place called Smoke Hole, West Virginia. It is about 55 miles away from, depending upon who you talk to, either the Green Bank Telescope, of course, GBT, Green Bank Telescope, or as the locals call it, that great big thing, which is also GBT. And that great big thing is the most enormous radio telescope I have ever seen in my entire life. It's the first one that I've seen in person. Now, this thing is taller than any of the buildings in Akron, Canton. Trust me, nothing that we have compares to this telescope. This telescope has over 2 acres of collection area. You know how these radio telescopes are built. The receiver is way up top, and it looks down on the collection area, which is a concave dish, if you will. And that particular collection area on this telescope, over 2 acres in size. It is amazing the discoveries that they have had on this telescope. And what is interesting about the radio telescopes, this particular telescope, the GBT, the great big thing, as the locals say, is not the first telescope that you see when you arrive on the property. They have a telescope there that came from Illinois. And back in 1937, there was a young man, I forget his name, it escapes me off the top of my head, but I'll get it for you later. But this young gentleman built a working radio telescope in his mother's backyard in Wheaton, Illinois.
That was Sheldon Cooper, wasn't it?
About 2 stories tall. It's as big as a house, and he built this in his mom's backyard back in 37. And he got all the supplies that he needed at the local lumber yard. Can you imagine? And so he had this enormous radio telescope, and he was doing radio telescope before it was cool. But these telescopes, they can see, so as to speak, because they don't see anything, they hear. But they can see with the aid of computers more than we can see with the human eye, and with the type of telescope that brings us back those beautiful pictures like the Hubble telescope. But you can only see so much on those types of telescopes, the optical telescopes. You can see way more with these radio telescopes. I'll give you a fascinating fact about these things. The most important thing to these radio telescopes are the minimizing of QRN and QRM. To all the ham radio operators listening to this show, and this is a ham radio show, you know that to be noise. QRM is man-made. QRN is that noise made by nature that we all contend with each and every day. Well, in order to make a radio telescope work, you have to minimize those noise sources as much as you can. And the way that they do that is this telescope in West Virginia, and this was one of 7 areas where they were going to locate this scope, and West Virginia won the bid and won the place because of how the area is. This telescope is surrounded by mountains, and for 33 square miles, there is a national quiet zone that occurs.
I was going to say that had to be a quiet zone there.
Yeah, it's all a quiet zone. There is no cell phone service. In fact, when my wife and I made our reservations at the hotel that we were going to stay at when we went down there for our anniversary, it told us right on the front page of the website, by the way, don't plan to bring your cell phones with you because they'll be of no use to you whatsoever. There's no cell phone service here. We do have a hardwired phone in your room if you need to make an emergency call. But the whole time that we were there, we were completely out of touch with the electronic world. The iPhone, I didn't even take it out of the car. I threw it in the glove box. That's where it was until our return trip home because it was useless. There's no signal down there whatsoever. The people that live there, they live without certain things. If you're in one of the houses in the miles surrounding the great big thing, then by living there, you understand the rules and you have to sign off on the rules. One of those rules is that you have to limit the noisemakers that you have in your home. And all the homes there are equipped with Faraday cages. And anything that is a noisemaker, when it's not in use, goes in the Faraday cage. one of the things that you and I have in our home, Pat, and probably most, in fact, really, honestly, probably all the people watching or listening to this program tonight have a microwave in their home, right?
Right.
Not there. You can't have a microwave in your home because your microwave is a noisemaker. And, and I saw these Faraday cages in use down there, and they are incredible. If you're not familiar with what a Faraday cage is, I encourage you to Google that, look it up, and you'll see something maybe that you've never seen before. But this is a cage that can completely you can put everything that you have in your home that makes noise inside this cage, and you can shut the door, and you have no noise outside the cage. They are incredibly effective, and they are a fascinating piece of gear.
We should actually do a show on that topic. I know quite a bit about that. There is an EMP show that I've wanted to do here for quite a while since we started this. And in that EMP presentation, I talk about how to build a Faraday cage and what it is. You have to have complete, or pretty much complete air seal to it, and nothing metal on the inside. It has to be completely insulated from the outside world and isolated. And there's several designs for those. But maybe we ought to do that one of these days.
That sounds like fun. They had a Faraday cage there in the theater where we watched a video about the great big thing before we went out to see it, and it was interesting because they had an oscilloscope that was connected to the inside of the Faraday cage, so they were using the cage in reverse. And she took a regular standard cell phone and turned it on, and with the Faraday cage shut, the oscilloscope was flat. There was no noise whatsoever, but she opened the cage up and stuck that cell phone in the cage and shut the door, and that oscilloscope went crazy. You wouldn't believe how much noise we live in each and every day here in this environment we've created.
You know, I can give you an example of something that actually is historical, that if you think about it, you're going to go, yeah, I remember that. 9/11, the day of 9/11, after they grounded all the planes, how quiet was that?
It was quiet. It was spooky quiet.
Exactly. And it was quiet for the 2 or 3 days that they were grounded. There you go.
You don't think about stuff like that. And there's all this stuff that makes noise. We don't even give it a second thought, do we? I mean, we just live with it on a day-to-day basis. All the noise of the cars, and we just live in a constant sea of noise, and we live in a constant sea of electronic noise, whether we realize it or not.
My curiosity would get me down there. I would almost have to take a dipole with me, throw it up in a tree, not to transmit on it, but just to see what I could hear.
Now, let me say this. I'm glad you brought that up, because that's what everybody was wondering. It's just you brought it up. The question is, are you allowed to be a ham radio operator in a national quiet zone? And
No.
The answer to that question is yes, you are. They do have a hate-hate relationship with ham radio operators in the national quiet zone, and they are allowed to live there. Now, having said that, let me give you some caveats.
I think I can actually answer that, because those questions, there were several questions about that on the ham radio tests that we give, and it seems to me that during certain times of the day, when it's likely that the telescope is operating, you're not allowed to do anything to distract it.
That's 100% correct. There are certain bands that you can be on, and there's certain bands that you cannot be on. The bands that you plan to be on, you have to register those with the FCC. So believe me, they know everything about your habits and what you're going to be transmitting on and when you're going to be transmitting. And all that takes into consideration their needs. Their needs come first and foremost. Your needs are secondary. And since that telescope is just as effective any time of the night or day, and since they do about 8,000 hours every year right now of study with that telescope, there are many times when you can't get on your ham radio and you can't talk, but you're advised of all that on a continual, ongoing basis. And they constantly monitor that area for noise. So if noise is coming from your residence, they will know instantaneously when the noise starts. And in certain types of noise, you can expect to receive an email because the folks that run the telescope for the national government, they have everybody's email address, they have their address, they have your phone number. You have to provide those things if you're going to live there, and you have to be able to be reached. And so if they phone you up and out of the clear blue, and whatever they advise you to do, you have to do. And she said, because she lived, the one lady that took us on the tour, she lives in that area, and she said many times, here will come the electric company, or here will come this company or that company knocking on the front door, because the telescope folks heard a noise coming from that property, and they'll come investigate that, and they'll replace an insulator, or they'll replace wiring, or they'll replace whatever it is they have to replace at your home to stop that noise. And you just understand that that's part of living there.
A friend of mine would love that. See,
Yeah?
every time he gets on the radio, he finds something to complain about as far as noise. Doesn't matter where he lives. He's lived out in Atwater before. He's lived down in south of Canton. You name it. He's living over here in Akron now. And I'm getting a 5/9 noise level.
He's probably the guy that goes over and knocks on the neighbor's house and says, since you put that pool lighting in, I'm running an S9 over here on my radio.
Exactly.
Or since you put that motor out there, you put that garage door opener in your garage. I can't hear myself think in my house. I know just those kind of people. Yeah. And they make a good point in a way. I guess those are the kind of people that keep us all honest. But I have to tell you, not last night, but the night before last, when I was on 40 meters, I was talking to a gentleman in Belgium, and that was a pretty nice call. But one of the reasons that call was as good as it was, and that was a sideband call too. That was not CW, which is very unusual for me. But I was talking with him on my Swan 700 CX. I was running about 0.240 kilowatt, about 240 watts, and I had a real nice conversation. But that night, the noise here was S1. This was the night before last. It was so quiet at one point, I had to look to make sure my radio was on. And that just shows you how accustomed we have grown to noise and to having S5 and S6 and S7 nights on the radio. The biggest thing that you can do, and Pat and I got this from Pat, it's not original with me, and we've told you this ad nauseum here on the program, but the least expensive, easiest, most effective thing you can do to improve your station is just noise reduction. Simple noise reduction. If you are listening to a bunch of noise, that means you're not listening to a bunch of other ham radio operators, because you can't hear them through the noise, but they're out there. All you have to do is lower the noise level in your station, and you'll be amazed at how much more you can hear, and the places where you can communicate where you never thought you'd ever be able to reach. Trust me on that one, because I've been there and I've done that, and I can assure you that it's true. Pat, it will surprise you to know that while I was down in West Virginia, some QSL cards came here to the house.
Wow, I don't know how you keep getting all these QSL cards.
Isn't that amazing? I'm, and by the way, this week I got some nice color ones. Keep spending all this money on the cards, guys. These look great. Look at this beautiful call-in station. Now, you talk about boat anchors. This is boat anchor paradise right here. This is station K0BS. And, it's kind of interesting. He was talking to me, BS, but all that aside, he has a beautiful, beautiful call-in station. This gear circa late 50s, early 60s, and it is just fantastic. I love seeing that card. This is a keeper right here. Thank you so much for sending it along. I will treasure that card as I do them all. Here is a homemade jobber. I don't know if it's homemade or it's printed, but nevertheless, it's one of the old school black and white type cards. This is N0LUF, and he, interestingly enough, he doesn't realize this, but he lives about 3 blocks from the house where my wife grew up in as a child in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And so he's right out on the Front Range. Every morning, the difference between N0LUF and you and I, Pat, is he gets up every morning, and when he looks out the back window of his house as he's pouring his cup of coffee, he looks at Pikes Peak, whereas you and I look at nothing.
My backyard.
That's the difference between that gentleman and us. Here's a great card. We're moving into the color again now. This is W0FN, and he's from Des Moines, Iowa, and I'm an Iowa boy. My grandfather, Charlie Collins, is one of the Collinses, of course, Collins radios. And so I have radio in my blood. And this is the area that we're from, out in Iowa. And I noticed that he likes to rock climb, you know, indoors, the indoor rock climbing that people like you and I might actually take in, Pat, one of these days. But he has a nice station. And I will say this about this gentleman. He has a fantastic signal. He came in like he was sitting right here in the room with me, and that was a CW call. Here's another beautiful color card. Lots of people have nice property. They have way more property than I have here in Massillon, I assure you. But this is KA5SJE, and this was a CW call, and it was very nice to talk with him. Couple of cards that came in this week. The last one's going to make you laugh. I'm going to save that for you, Pat, because you're going to relate to this last card. But on the day and the night of the Ohio QSO party, which is a big deal here in Ohio, right? It's our chance to shine. It also happens to be the Kansas QSO party, and may I say, the Kansas QSO people have way nicer cards than we have here in Ohio. Here is the Kansas card, folks, and this is a nice card from a station that I talked to. You can see him up here in the corner. No, he's over on this side. We're backwards. He's in Kansas City, if you can't tell, and I spent a little time in Kansas. It's not much to write home about or report home about, but doggone it, they've got nice QSL cards. So this is K0R, and all of their stations that day, they had a K0A, K0B, K0 on and on and on, you know, all the way down through R. And it was nice to talk to them. And there was a good signal that night between Kansas and Ohio. And so I didn't have any trouble whatsoever reaching any of these stations. But
I know several.
8 o'clock at night. Go ahead, Pat.
I know several of our guys from the club here, or from my club, that actually was in both those contests.
Let me tell you what happened at 8 o'clock at night. At 8 o'clock at night, which would be midnight UTC, the Ohio QSO party was ending, and Kansas had started. And listen, here at 8 o'clock at night, it went from being the Ohio QSO party to being the wall-to-wall, the Kansas QSO party. I mean, they flat out took the radio waves over, and they came with an army. And so I suggest moving forward that Ohio find another day. There's got to be another day with a state that is less popular than Kansas. But when you think about it, where does Kansas sit? It sits right in the middle of the country. And so they have equal picking. They can go east or they can go west, and everybody in the, in the nation can talk to them. Yep. So it's no wonder that QSO party is so busy. Now, here's the one I told you I was saving for you. You're gonna like this. Here's a guy with a sense of humor. This one came out of the Ohio QSO party, and this is a little place. I don't know where it is. I really should have looked it up before the show tonight. Shame on me. But this gentleman, this operator that I talked to on CW during the Ohio QSO party is from a place called Yellow Springs, Ohio. I'm going to try to get that up there as close as I can. Can you see it okay? Look at those fine vehicles, Pat.
Oh, sweet.
This looks like the Mystery Machine, doesn't it, from Scooby-Doo?
Yep.
There you go. So there's your Ohio QSO Party Yellow Springs card. We're going hippie right here on The World According to Elmer.
Yeah, I did that once when I had
did?
hair. When I had hair.
Yeah. Boy, can I relate to that. I get this big bald spot up on top that you can't see. But since this isn't 80 meters, we won't talk about it.
Yeah, that's right. No colonoscopy jokes or anything.
No colonoscopy stories. Yeah, that's the old joke. Why don't you do CW on 80 meters? Because colonoscopy is too hard to tap out. Little CW joke there, Pat.
Yeah, a little.
Pat, are you awake? Okay, let's go to social media here. Tonight's show, we're talking about something very frightful, very frightening tonight. A gentleman said, and I don't know whether this is this guy's name or whether this is a handle specifically designed for this particular occasion, but he said, and the fellow's name is Robert Lee. Seriously, you can't make this stuff up, Pat. It's Robert Lee here. He says, first ever 2-meter net check-in, and totally jumbled my response to the question. They asked a question on this particular net. The question was, well, what got you interested in ham radio? Now, that should be easy to answer, right, Pat?
Yep. I was dared just like you were.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I had this guy named Pat Morrow dare me. But anyway, he said, suddenly I felt like I was at a podium. Now get this visual. He's not on the radio anymore. Now he's the president of the United States, and he's standing up there at a podium. He said, I don't know what I said, and no one else did either. He said, he said, oh, this is I couldn't have written this. I don't know what I said, and no one else did either. Net Control messaged me a signal report after the net, but I think he was just trying to make sure I hadn't had a stroke. That's all of that I can read, Pat. So I guess my question to you is mic fright a common thing?
Yes. You'd be surprised.
Yeah.
I can tell you that I've not only seen it from a personal side. Everybody thinks, oh, these guys are running podcasts. They've been around radios. Well, the simple fact of it was, when I was young, I couldn't stand the sound of my voice. I still don't really care for it. But when it came down to it, you, especially in amateur radio, when you're about to transmit for the first time, there's 1,000,001 thoughts that go through your head. Am I going to do this right? Am I going to get my call sign right? Am I going to tell this guy what he wants to know? What am I going to talk about? How am I going to talk about it? Who am I going to talk about? You know, all that stuff goes through your head. And when they call on you, especially when you're checking into a net, and I've had this happen 100 times before with being that I've been in net control in a lot of them. They key up and they'll sit and, you have to listen to the masters of this stuff once in a while in order to decide what you're going to put out. And the masters will come on and say, I got this one guy. I just thought of this. He comes on and he says, well, I had my last therapy session today, and I'm not going to go into that, but then I decided I was going to sit down at the radio, and over the weekend I worked the QSO party on 40 meters, and now I got to I decided since my radio wasn't getting out well enough, I decided I was going to go out and chop a few limbs down, and now I'm on my way out to do that. See you all next week. I'll update everybody next week. Now, that may not seem like much, but you've covered 2 or 3 minutes. You've covered part of what's going on in this guy's life, and he's actually used the radio. And you've got,
Actually, what he did is he snuck in everything that he was doing in a manner that he wasn't telling you what he was doing.
right. And, that's the way it ought to be. People get in there a lot of times. Well, oh, okay, I'm new on this repeater, and I hope everybody has a good day. Well, that's fine. That's fine too. Nobody really. There's no scripted stuff on there that you actually have to say or follow. You just get on and when you talk on a radio or talk on a repeater, people hear your voice and they will tend to talk back to you. We went into that a couple of weeks. A couple of weeks ago we had that topic of what you say when you during your first QSO, and that guy said that he didn't like, because he didn't think he had anybody that would be interested in what he is. He wouldn't get any kind of response. Well, I
Then he
find that,
listed like 20 hobbies.
and that's a bunch of hooey. There's always going to be somebody out there that's got something in common with you. Heck,
Yes.
you're both on a repeater on amateur radio. You got that in common. The whole. I guess my whole point here is you can't be afraid to screw it up. If you do, there's going to be 1,000,001 other times, and nobody expects you to be perfect on your first transmission, except there's a couple of things you have to know that you have to do. And this is why amateur radio does testing. It's to make sure that you know what to do in a circumstance. Yeah.
Well, that's right. And you know what? You raised an awful good point. There are a certain number of people, and a certain group of people especially, that will point out that it is possible to operate an amateur radio in a dire emergency without having gone through all the testing and without having gone through the learning process. And what they don't realize is the reason that we do nets and the reason that we have field day and the reason that we have contests is because all of this is a happy type form of practice. Now, if we were to say to somebody, well, we're going to all practice today exchanging traffic. We're going to practice taking and pushing calls forward. That sounds too much like work. But if we can turn it into a game, or we can turn it into a net where we just sit around and talk about what's happening with us and the doctor, we can still teach those things, but we can teach them in a way that is fun and entertaining. And folks don't realize that part of the reason that amateur radio operators do what they do is because they're practicing for the SHTF days in advance so that they know what to do when that happens. And that speaks to your point, Pat.
We did a net last night. One of my club members was a net. And every once in a while, we'll, like that thing you were talking about there, we actually do trivia questions. Last night was, what is Lucy? NASA is doing something with Lucy. What is it? And it was amazing that the people that would key up and say, well, I know what that is. Isn't that going to go out there around asteroids and collect data and circle around? What it turns out, it's an 8 or 9 year mission that NASA's putting on that is going to go out between Jupiter and Saturn into the asteroid belt and look for clues on the evolution of life and the evolution of the universe. I myself came up with a pretty cool thing. I'm glad we brought this up. I said that they were going to put diamond filters on that thing so that they could have Lucy in the sky with diamonds.
I can hear us coming to this.
But if you keep this kind of stuff in mind when you're talking on a net, you won't be as nervous when you key up. And,
well, we happen to have a video that talks about this very frightening topic, Pat, of mic fright. And I'm glad to know, I'm reassured now that you said it's a common problem. So all those times that I stumbled over my words, I guess I don't feel so bad. But let's go ahead and roll the tape and see what this gentleman has to say about mic fright and see if we can pick any tips up that maybe we can use as reminders. the next time we get on the repeater and we go ahead and make a call.
This is the
You're
10.
listening to The World According to Elmer on Crooked River Radio.
On today's show, we're going to be discussing
Is this the right one?
That's
Mike
it.
Fright, right here, right now, on ham radio for non-techies. All right, guys. So this is something I thought was going to be interesting to talk about. And it's kind of weird because, if you're going to get on the radio, if you're going to get on ham radio specifically, you're kind of have the expectation you're going to be talking into the thing, right? But there are people out there that have a fear of talking into the mic, and getting on the air, the first time might sound kind of scary. Nothing I say is really going to help this out. You're going to have to work this out in your own head, but I'm going to try my best to give you a few things that will help you to overcome this fear. If you're going to get on the radio, you're going to want to talk to other people. And it's not as, it might be scary at first, but you're going to get the hang of it. And I want to give you a couple tips and tricks that I used to help me out. So let's pop over to my desktop as always. So, how I like my slides. So, dealing with mic fright. First and foremost, what should you do? Well, my suggestion is to listen, listen, listen. Find a station where people are talking and listen to how they interact with each other. Now, I touched on this on one of my previous videos when I talked about getting into ham radio, and I didn't go into it in full detail like I am now. But the biggest thing is get online and listen to other people. Listen to what the lingo's like. Listen to how they're speaking to each other, what they're talking about. It's very unique in that you're not going to have a whole lot of in-depth conversation about a lot of things, but at the same time, I can't really explain. You just have to get on the air and listen. But my big thing is, or my main point is, get on there and listen to what people are talking about, and get used to that kind of stuff, and kind of just incorporate that into what you might want to say for the first time. My second suggestion is practice by getting on a Zoom call and talking. Look, I get in front of this microphone. I'm talking to whoever's going to possibly find my video. I have no idea who's going to be watching, who's going to scrutinize what I'm saying, and I don't really care. You have to turn on that little ignore switch behind your right ear there. It's right back there. And just ignore the fact that you can't be afraid of making mistakes. It's going to happen, and it'll go away. I promise you, it will go away. So practice by getting on a Zoom call and talk with other people. Zoom is downloadable for free. Hook up and talk to a friend, or maybe find a group that's doing a Zoom call and jump on it and maybe just listen for a few minutes. And if you have a question about something, jump in and ask. It gets you used to talking to this mysterious microphone here. And the microphone's not going to come out and bite you either. My next suggestion is going and finding a local club and see if they have a net running regularly that you can attend. Now, I told you guys my club runs a daily net. They call it the Stir Crazy Net, and it started because of the whole pandemic thing from last year. And they found a niche where getting online 5 days a week, or getting on the radio 5 days a week, actually, they bring up a topic of discussion. They'll ask everybody to check in. They'll present the topic, and everybody has their turn to answer that question. Now, honestly, guys, being that I'm still somewhat new to this, a lot of the questions that they bring out for the daily conversation, I may or may not get involved in. I might just sit back and listen and maybe learn more, which is what I suggest you guys do. But there are occasions we'll ask something, have some general question about something, and I have something to say about that. And I'll jump on. My first time doing it, I was kind of freaked out. I was like, oh, what am I going to say? I'm going to start stuttering. Don't worry about it. If you overthink this, you're going to screw yourself into not doing anything. And that's the worst thing you can do in this hobby. So find a local club, see if they got a net running, listen a little bit. If you want to hop in, and you're licensed, obviously, you got to be licensed to jump on the nets. Check in. When it comes around to your turn, write down your notes, what you want to say. Have it right in front of you on a little pad of paper, and have it right there so you can keep your mind focused on what you wanted to say so you don't get derailed on it. Keep your topic simple if you're going to talk on the radio at first. And examples are, talk about the radio you're using and the antenna you have, and the experience you had buying it and stuff. Just keep it very plain Jane and finite as to what you're talking about. People understand these things. The other hams you're going to be interacting with on the radio will understand these things. So don't, again, my biggest takeaway on this thing is to be don't overthink it. Just get in there and do it. This goes to my next topic, which is the KISS method. Keep it simple, stupid. Keep your topic simple. Keep it on something you know about. If somebody brings up something you don't know, it's okay to say, hey, I haven't really had an experience with that yet. I want to give that. I'm looking into that. I'm going to research that a little bit more. But right now, being new, I haven't really had a chance to jump on. They'll understand. They might say, hey, here's some resources. Go check that out, and they might help you out. My next one is going to be finding an Elmer to talk to and help you progress in ham radio. If you have a local club in the area, you found your local club, there's going to be people there that are older, that have more experience with ham radio, and they're going to be willing to help you. That's what Elmer's job is, to help out new hams get used to doing the things we do in ham radio and help you to progress and get further along in the hobby. So you can find somebody to talk to, either in person, if your club's doing in-person meets, or if there's like this weekend I went out to my first ham fest. It wasn't the biggest thing in the world. I got to meet a couple people that I only heard on the radio before, and I finally got to meet them face to face. We had a couple good chats, and they understand. I come right out and I tell people, look, I've only been in this hobby for X amount of time. I'm still learning a lot of stuff, but here's what I do know, and that brings on the conversation. And I can't really express this enough. You have to have some conversational skill to be on the radio. I mean, just like you do in life. When you go up and walk up, you meet people, you're going to talk to them. You're not going to sit there and just some of you might, but most of the time you're going to engage people in the conversation. You'll find some little tiny thing they're talking about that you can engage in and give your 2 cents on. So I encourage you to keep trying and keep doing these things. Again, find an Elmer to talk to. They might have some better suggestions for you that I brought up. I just kind of slapped this together a couple minutes this morning before I did the show to give you guys a couple ideas and try to give you as many options as possible. Maybe you don't want to get on a Zoom call, or you don't have a webcam or a computer or whatever, and you don't want to deal with that. Fine, you don't have to, but there's other solutions out here for you. The next thing on here, if you have a friend who has a ham radio and y'all are both licensed, find an obscure channel you can use and practice on there. Now, it's kind of cheating because you know the person you're talking to on the other end, but still it gets you used to pushing down that PTT button and talking into that radio and getting a conversation going. It'll help you know where your strong points are. It'll help you know where your weak points are. It'll let you know how if you're using the radio properly, if you're holding it down properly, and the different little functions of your radio. So it kind of helps you in multiple ways. Keep in mind that experienced hams weren't always experienced. They will be understanding and willing to help you. Not everybody gets on the radio for the first time and just automatically knows what to say and say the perfectly right things the perfect right way. It doesn't happen. All right. Even when I got on the radio the first time, I listened first, kind of see what people are saying. I wrote down what people were saying and how they're doing it. Then I went and practiced that on my radio with it off and just practiced doing it and see how I sounded and see how I felt when I was doing it. And it became easier and easier. Then I finally got on the net and said something. I was still scared out of my mind, but I did it, and I felt good after doing it. I was like, you know what? I hit that milestone. I had a goal there. I reached it. I went right to it, and it didn't bug me. So, hams are there. You got the experienced hams out there. They're, like I said, they're understanding. They're going to be willing to help you out. They're not going to chastise you. They're not going to give you crap. People know that there's new hams coming into this hobby right now in massive amounts since last year's lockdowns. So they're expecting new hams to show up and get on the radio. I've talked to a couple people that got on the radio for the first time. They're like, this is, they call it their call sign. You can hear it in their voice. They sound like they're freaking out. So I didn't hear anybody else jump in to welcome them. So I was like, what the hell? I grabbed the radio and said, hey, so-and-so, this is KI5MPL. How you doing? And we started a conversation. We started talking. I talked to him like I'm talking to you right now, like I'm talking to any other person I meet on a daily basis. So you have to just give it a shot and try it. Now, the next point here is, this is what I call elitist hams. If you get some elitist on the air that starts giving you crap, ignore them and move on. Discouraging other ham radio operators is never good for the hobby. People like that really irritate me. And again, I'm new. I might not have, the place to be irritated yet. But you know what? If people are trying to get into this hobby and they're trying to do what they want to do, and they want to get on the radio and they want to talk, why should somebody else get on there and start giving them crap about things? What kind of person does that? So if you run into somebody like that, ignore them, put the radio down for 10 minutes, come back on later on, find somebody else. Don't let these people drag you down or discourage you or give you any apprehensions about getting back on the radio. The radio is for everybody to use. It's free to use. Nobody owns a frequency. So you should be able to get on there and talk to people, and you'll find people. You're going to find a lot of people. I have a whole list of people. I start writing down their call signs now and their names. And I've gotten to the point now where when I hear their call sign, oh, that's so-and-so. I know exactly who it is. And I might jump in the conversation if they're not, engaged with somebody else, and just talk to them. So it's all for fun. Last couple things here. We all start somewhere, and you can do this. Again, you're brand new to ham radio. I get it. I am too. I'm still learning a lot of stuff. I haven't even gotten on HF yet. I'm still waiting for my other antenna to come in so I can jump on the HF bands. And people are like, oh, HF is scary. It's just another frequency. How can it be any scarier than VHF, UHF? Guess I'll find out. But I'm not going to let it discourage me. I'm spending a lot of money on this equipment, spending a lot of time learning all this new stuff to use in this hobby on a regular basis, and I don't need a bunch of crap in my head freaking me out and keep me from moving forward. You're going to have to work this out in your own mind however you can. You maybe utilize some of the things I'm showing you here in this list. Try them all. Try one. Try none. But either way, if you're going to get on ham radio, you're going to have to get over that mic fright, and it will. I promise you. No matter how many times I say this, you may or may not believe me now. You will get over it, and before you know it, you'll be talking like anybody else on the radio. The second biggest point in this entire discussion is going to be imperfect action is better than no action at all. It's better you get on that radio and say something and maybe screw up or make a mistake than going, I wonder if I get on the radio if I'll make any mistakes. Try it. You have nothing to lose here. And again, most hams, I'd say 99.9% of the hams out there are going to be understanding, and they're not going to give you crap about it. You get that 0.1% that wants to be a prick, drop them. Forget them. You don't need them. You don't need that in your life. Keep moving forward. This is a great hobby to get into. And if you want to utilize ham radio for what it was designed for, don't let anybody stop you. This is your hobby. This is something you've decided to do. You're making an investment in it. Utilize it. So my biggest thing is, get on the radio and start enjoying your new hobby. Get on the radio now. Do it today. Obviously, if you have to be licensed, but if you've got your license, jump on that radio and try it out. You're going to have a lot of fun with this. I promise you. Anyway, let's go back to my main cam here. So that's my suggestions as far as getting on ham radio for the first time. Mic fright is a real thing. I had the same issues too. I still to this day don't like getting up in front of people and talking in big rooms full of people. But I find that once I get up there and start doing it, I'll pick out one or two people I want to talk to in the audience. I'll start talking to like that person, even on the address the entire room. Last year's lockdowns forced everybody to stay in the house. The only way you could talk to people was through Zoom. And I got a lot of Zoom calls. I have students from a course that I wrote, and they're constantly having issues. I have to get on Zoom calls with them. And sometimes they freak out about getting on a Zoom call because they think I'm like this celeb. It's like, dude, I'm your instructor. Let's just get on the call. Let's figure out what your problem is. Let's get it resolved and get you moving forward. So I had a lot of practice last year using Zoom extensively, just to get me used to talking into a microphone. But this same skill here, with me talking to you through YouTube videos, transfers over to talking on an HT. It's the same thing if I'm talking here or if I'm pushing down and talking here. So do something, because sitting around and letting your radio sit there and rot is a waste of your money and a waste of your time. I hope that this stuff helped you guys out. If you have any comments, if you have any suggestions, please drop them down below. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. That will help the YouTube algorithm show my video to other hams. And please like and subscribe by hitting the little bell and be notified of any new videos that I put out in the future. For now, guys, this is Ham Radio for Non-Techies. My name is Scott. My call sign is KI5NPL. You guys have a great day and 73s.
We sure appreciate Scott coming by today. And Scott, I see that you got my email about what to wear. So it's all good. Good job, buddy. What to do when it comes your time to pick the mic up and talk. He's right. Just pick the mic up and talk.
I want to add, you know, I've got something to add here.
Oh, I know you've got something. That's why the name of the program is The World According to Elmer. So please, sir, Elmer, Pat, it's all yours.
He brought a lot of very valid points, but on a couple of them, he didn't go far enough.
Okay.
If you're Mike Fright, you're afraid of your first transmission on a radio. If you go into a Facebook group of amateur radio people and you think, I don't want to ask a dumb question in here either, and somebody comes back to you and says, what are you even doing on a radio?
Yeah. How did you get your license?
Ignore those elitists. They represent about 1/100% of amateur radio. Amateur radio people in general are some of the friendliest people you'll ever meet.
Amen. Yes, they are.
And the simple fact of it is, if you've got a question in a Facebook group on a repeater or whatever, and you stumble across somebody like me, they're going to tell you. I could be, for all intents and purposes, I've got 31 years in radio, in amateur radio. I was a CB'er before that for 28 years. I've got 59 years in radio, in communicating radio, if you want to judge it by that. I could be considered an elitist, but I don't have that elitist attitude. If you ask me a question, you're going to get an answer from me. At least as far as I'm concerned, I'm telling you the truth. I'm telling you what I know is right. I may not always be right, and I'll be the first to admit that. Nobody's that way. It's that old saying, I may not be perfect, but I'm as close as you could get. But as far as the attitudes go, there is no reason for any attitude. People want to get in here and talk. Reacted bad.
When I first met you, I would have reacted badly to any kind of elitist attitude. And the only thing that I caught off of you was, here's a guy that really wanted to help me succeed in ham radio. That was my takeaway. And I'm that way
with everybody. Hell, I'm the president of a club. I have been in radio for, like I said, 59 years. And I love to educate. I love to educate people. That is one of the reasons my club has got the education committee that it does. I was the one responsible for that before I came along 7 years ago. There was no education committee there. I started it because I wanted to teach and I wanted people to learn, and by way of our club. And that's the way it's been ever since, and hopefully it's going to continue. I've got good teachers. I've got some of the best, I consider the best teachers in amateur radio. There's college professors that are doing it. I got one college professor. I've got another guy that's been in amateur radio longer than I have. And communications is longer than I. He actually worked for the University of Akron. I've got, you met Anthony.
Anthony is amazing.
Yeah, there's your technical skill. In amateur radio, you stumble across these people. And these people are nothing but very, very willing to help you out in any kind of an issue you've got. So don't be afraid to reach out to them, and don't be afraid to key the mic.
Well, here's the thing. Until you key the mic, nothing happens. And you have to keep that in mind. people will sit there and stare at the radio, and then they walk away from it, and the wife goes, well, how did it go today on the radio? Well, damn it, I couldn't get anybody to talk to me. Well, no, wait a minute. You never keyed the mic up. And unless you can get the courage to depress your thumb and you can click that little push to talk button on the mic, nobody knows you're there. I think that's the biggest mistake that young people make, is they just assume that other people know that they're there. And by the way, when I say young people, I'm talking about young to the hobby, because this hobby attracts 80-year-old people that are in their very first week of being a ham radio operator. So it has nothing to do with age. It has to do with experience as far as the radio is concerned. But until you'll key that mic and you'll say something, no one knows you're there.
The average age of an amateur radio operator is 58 years old. Do you know that?
I believe that. I believe that, and I think people become more interested in it as time goes on. Now, a big portion of my working life was in broadcasting, and I used to work for NBC, and I was involved in the news. And I came to understand and to learn some things about radio in those years that not only apply to network radio or to radio as in commercial radio, but also can be carried over into ham radio. And if I had anything that I would share tonight, and I would leave a new to the hobby operator with, it would be this. Many people, even people in commercial radio, some of them go many years before they understand this little truth that applies to all of radio. And that truth is this: radio is a personal medium, which is to say radio is a one-on-one communication. When I get on the radio, the commercial radio, I don't speak to a group of people, even though I will know how many people at any given time are listening to that station or to that network, because we're supplied with that information. But I never treated it like that. I always treated it that it was just me on this end and one other person listening to the radio on the other end. And the same is true in ham radio. If you get onto a net thinking, oh my gosh, there's 200 people out there that I'm going to be talking to on this net, and for all I know, there's 2,000 more that are listening that aren't going to say a thing. What if I mess this up? Then you're in the mentality that you're talking to a group of people. And I think it's that mentality that leads you to what we were talking about earlier, where this guy that wrote this letter that we started with today said, all of a sudden, in my mind, I was up at the podium and I was speaking. I mean, he's giving an address now to a group of people. That's not how radio is. Radio is a one-on-one communication. It's just you and the other guy. And so if you can block out the other people that are on that conversation or on that call, and you can just speak, in this case, to the network operator, and you can say, yeah, this is KG8RRY, this is Gerry, here's what's taking place at over here at my house, and this is what I've been involved with, and this was something I found interesting this week. And with that, this is KG8RRY, and I'm going to turn things back over to Net. And so if you can have that one-on-one conversation with that other party, then I don't think that fear is going to enter into this thing at all. But you've got to block out the other people, and you have to concentrate on the task at hand.
Exactly.
And that task, the task that is always at hand in radio, is the communication of one idea from one person to another person.
If you listen to the texts of a lot of nets, you'll hear something to the effect of, this net it meets here every Monday night and is for the benefit of amateur radios to bring amateur-related ideas and experiences to the community, to the amateur community. That's we're all open to ideas. You're talking to the net control when you're talking. You can address other people. You'd be surprised at how many people are probably listening on scanners. Although
you'll never hear from.
It
That's
says
right
in the rules that you are not to address any of those people. It says you are not to broadcast to to any medium, and you're not, and the scanner thing would be another medium. Is the way
And
they
you
look.
just brought up an outstanding point, and that's something we should interject right now. There is a difference between communication and broadcasting. Well, what is that communication? A difference between those two things, getting on the radio and talking to this other person versus the word broadcasting. And I heard a guy on the net the other night say something that borderlined on broadcasting. He made a statement. He said, and I wanted to say to all the listeners out there, and then he
Yep.
went on with his statement. When he said that, he ceased communicating and he began broadcasting. And the difference between broadcasting and communicating is this. When I communicate with Pat, and we have this program that we're on right now, and I'm communicating with you there at home, I have expectation of a reply. If I say to Pat, what do you think about that? And I look at Pat, I expect him to answer me. So there's an expectation of reply. If I speak to you, you're not going to answer me back, I don't think. You're not going to talk at your computer or talk at your radio, depending upon how you're hearing me, but your answer is going to be up here. But I have expectation that you'll listen and react to what I'm saying. There is no expectation of reply in broadcasting. So if you come to the point where you're talking at everyone on your local net, you are broadcasting, and broadcasting is against the rules. We're to be communicators. We're not to be broadcasters. There is a medium for broadcast. And if you think broadcast is your thing, give a call to the station manager at Crooked River Radio and say, I've got something to say to the general public, and he or she will, I no doubt,
We can record it
arrange
for you.
some time.
Now,
you can have your broadcast.
now, with every rule, there is always that thing called what?
An exception.
An exception. And
Sure.
I have an exception for you, what you just said about the broadcasting rule.
Okay, go ahead.
There's a thing called a QST. The following is a QST. You know what that is?
Yeah, I do know what that is.
That, my friends, is an this is an amateur broadcast and could be considered a broadcast for the benefit of amateur radio. That's the only exception that works. If you want to get on there and talk about your Aunt Mabel and what she did last night and you don't expect an answer back, that's broadcasting. But if you say, at this point in time, we're having a ham fest at such and such location. It will be from 2:30 to 4:30 in the afternoon. We hope you all can come, and that's it. And it'll QP out. That's not a broadcast, or that's a QST style of broadcast.
Another good example might be repeating some ham radio news, or perhaps giving a weather forecast.
Right. You actually have amateur radio news line, which is a broadcast. But they always start out, the following is a QST, and then they go into the news. So there you go.
Don't be afraid to get on the radio. Don't be afraid to open the mic. I think that just a little bit ago, I think our Elmer, Pat, summed it up best. You're not going to be under attack. You're not going to be bitten. And he brought up the gentleman that spoke on our program tonight seems to have had some experience, perhaps with some abrasive people, because he seems to kind of have a chip on his shoulder. I don't know if you noticed that or not with what he was saying. That has never been my experience, at least not here locally. I've never talked to anybody that I felt talked down at me, or in any way tried to speak at me as if I didn't know enough. Now I've had people correct me. And I've corrected other people before. I was on a net one night, and I had a gentleman talking ahead of me, and he made a statement that was simply not true. And for the sake of the young folks that were on the net that night that had been given bad information as if it were gospel, and I'll tell you what he said. He said, made a blanket statement that ladder line was a thing of the past. Ladder line was unusable because it was so lossy. And anybody that knows anything about ham radio and ham radio electronics and engineering knows that nothing could be further from the truth than what he said. So I couldn't let that go by uncorrected without saying, hey, you know what? We need to talk for just a moment about transmission line, and we need and just a point of fact about ladder line. But when I said what I said, it was simply to correct something that was said that was incorrect. I didn't attack that person personally.
Yeah,
Now, I've never experienced that on the radio, and so I don't know exactly where he was coming from on that. I just have not been party to any personal attacks. And I can tell you that on the networks or the nets that I listen to, which include the ones here in our area in Northeast Ohio, including the one at Pat's Club, the one up at Cuyahoga Falls and Massillon. There's one in Doylestown. I listen to all these nets, and I've never heard of anything other than camaraderie and a common sharing of common interests and goals. What Pat said earlier is true. If you never talked about anything more than radio, you'd be just fine.
Do we want to do this other clip that we got?
It's 10 after already. I think we're going to have to save that one for another day.
All right, it's up to you.
Next week, as we continue to get closer to the holiday, we'll have another frightful topic for you.
And we'll finish.
Are you
this
noticing a trend here, Pat?
Yeah, I can't wait till October to the.
Don't forget October 31st if you're in Northeast Ohio, or if you have an airplane, plan to come to the Canton Akron Airport, Canton Akron, Ohio, up at the Maps Air Museum. There is a ham fest, and so if you're looking for buried treasure on Halloween, that'll be the place to be.
You planning on attending that one?
You know, I was there last year, and I think I'll go for a little while. I did hear that they're going to be doing some ham testing. They're going to go ahead and do the test, I believe, for the technician's license there. And I had a guy send me an email, and he asked if I would mind helping administer those tests. And I told him that if they're going to do that, I'll be more than happy to help. That's just one of the ways that I feel like I can give back a little bit to the hobby here. So if they're going to have that, I definitely will be there, at least for that testing portion of it.
I'd almost like to it'd almost be fun to put a table up at one.
I don't know what they charge for tables. Might want to. I'll tell you what. I'll find out. And
it's usually not more than about $5 or $10.
Like $5 or something. It's just cheap.
It might be fun to put a table up and actually meet our fans. You know.
Yeah, do a broadcast. We could do that.
Yeah, we could do that. Anyway, you want to wrap it up, or?
Yeah. Well, listen. Don't be frightened. Pick the mic up and talk. It's all in good fun. And if you don't feel like talking, what he said in his very first point was also true. Listen, listen, listen. That's the way I got introduced to ham radio. I listened for a long time before I said anything, and there's not a thing in the world wrong with that. Our Elmer is Pat Morrow, and he is good to be with us each and every week in N8OQP. I am Gerry Sorenson, along for the ride, KG8RRY. Blessings to each one of you. Thank you for being here this evening, 73, and we'll see you next Tuesday evening at the same time right here on Crooked River Radio.
7-3, y'all.
We hope you enjoyed this presentation of the Crooked River Radio Network. See you again soon.